to Nickel City Chronicles. Today I got a returning guest, and Richie English. Last time you were here, man, you get quite a good following after that. Thousands of views, man. Thousands of views, man.
Yeah, that conversation took a turn.
It did. It did. And we didn't have any plans for that either.
We didn't.
We're doing the same thing right now.
Yeah.
We don't have any topics really. We're just gonna go up. The only thing we said was let's get into what we think this universe is, where we came from, where we're going.
That was our starting point.
We're gonna go deep and philosophical in this one. But the last one we had, dude, it was kind of cool because you and I both have been through our ups and downs with recovery and addiction. We kind of just met in the middle and talked about our path and where we're going and some solutions to some people who can identify, and it went well, and we got a good response from it, and that was really
fabulous because that's because of course addiction is the equal opportunity destroyer.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, probably, I don't know, besides COVID or viruses in general, like the most indiscriminate destroyer that you could ever meet. I'd had to give it to addiction because it's been with us since the dawn of man.
Right.
So
yeah,
you always know that you'll be able to relate to somebody in the room because we are all around in every demographic and any gender or any way anyone identifies themselves. Like addiction, it just doesn't know any boundaries.
And it's crazy because these two topics that kind of meet because one of the biggest solutions to addiction, and this can help not just for addiction but for life. When tragedy happens, you can get through things by having some principles in place. And sometimes, so actually I shouldn't say sometimes, most of the time, or for me at least, these principles sort of align into a philosophy of life, and sometimes it ties into religion, spirituality, but the core of it, you really get down to, who am I? Why am I here? Is this all about me? Am I the main character of this? Should I be selfish, or is it greater? Is this life bigger than me? Is there something greater that I'm a part of? You know what I'm saying?
I know exactly what you're saying,
and that's where,
because those are all the big scary questions.
And you never. And,
Sorry.
And if anyone thinks they have the answer to this question, you're flat lying.
Yeah.
Because there's just no way of knowing. I mean, it's like the analogy of an ant trying to understand the globe from his ant moll. Like, there's no way. There's not a possible way you can get that ant and teach it what this world is, and you know what I'm saying? And
so there's before I forget, there's a novel called Flatlands, and it's rather old. It's a classic, but it's all a big political allegory, and I won't be that guy or that douchebag that, oh, did you see this movie? Oh, well, you have to hear every detail about it. And then I'm not going to be that guy. It's just like very loosely. It's a political allegory that describes various class struggles in terms of telling a story about a bunch of geometric shapes, squares, circles, each representing a different class in a two-dimensional plane, the flatlands. And it's the story of what happens when these two-dimensional geometric figures that are the society of which is in an upheaval encounter a sphere that comes down out of 3 dimensions and encounters them, and obviously they have no idea that 3 dimensions exist. They can't conceive of it. So the sphere takes a 2-dimensional representative to 3D land to show him, and the way this author describes this is it's impossible to paraphrase. Like, it's magical, but it's mind-blowing. Like, he gets the closest to capturing the feeling of having one's mind blown.
Yeah.
And the reason that I bring Flatlands up is because understanding the answer to any one of these questions, I think, would be not possible. It would be like truly understanding infinity. Understanding something like without beginning or without end. Like, you can intellectually understand its implications, but to grasp
And
the
people try
essence of it that's like, hey, Neil, I want you to imagine a brand new color.
You can't.
You can't. You can
think
imagine
of purple,
shades.
You could think of
you
purple
know, like
and green. You can't go past
you
that.
can
though.
get really novel with your shades.
Yeah.
But I mean, just look at Jackson Pollock. But
And
you can't imagine a new thing. Only God can.
And you know what's crazy? You mentioned the flatlands thing. Is there's truth to that? Like science has now come to the point where we're now
There are
thinking,
11 dimensions that we know of.
Yeah, we know about these higher dimensions, and we also know that infinity. You can trying to represent infinity by math. The only way you can describe it is that each decimal is like 1 to 2 is infinite in between. 1.1, 1.11111 and that can keep going for infinity. So
actually 0, which is a pretty new concept mathematically. It's not as old as time. 0 is a concept.
Yes,
because 0 is not actually nothing. 0 represents like the infinite nature of all possible numbers, and the only reason it becomes 0
if somebody knows where
when you start taking integers out of that infinity,
right.
then it ceases to exist. And so it's really this zero is like a mind-bending thing.
Well, I'm trying to think because I love history, and I know that the concept of 0 didn't come till way later.
Yeah,
I don't know if it was the Chinese or the Babylonians. I can't remember who. Someone in the comment knows the answer.
Oh, it was later than that.
Yeah. It could have been the Greeks actually. I don't know.
I think 0 was...
All I know is this: that for a long time, for at least thousands of years, when mathematics was on the rise and people were discovering all these constants like pi, there wasn't no concept of 0 until way later on.
Mm-hmm.
And then they figured out that there could be nothing. It's mind blowing.
The 0 concept really freaked me out.
Yeah,
and it's like it's one of these sentences that I can only.
How can something come from nothing?
Well, yeah, it can't. So, oh God, don't get me started. Like, I'm trying to.
That's why I wanted to have you back on.
I'm trying not to. See, now I forgot what I was going to say about 0. Oh, 0 freaked me out because it turned my understanding of it on its head. Like the real explanation, I didn't know it was like the representation of all possible numbers, that one can conceive of. I always thought 0 was like absolute 0.
Right.
Or whatever. But of course math is like, I don't know, once the idea of like imaginary numbers or whatever, I'm gonna sound dumb, but like that kind of offends me. That tells me everything I need to know about math. Like when you start dealing with imaginary numbers, like I'm signing out.
Yeah,
at that point
we're too far in for that.
But
the reason why I said that was because we're at the point now where quantum science, which is the new leading science, quantum theory.
It's the most successful theory of describing
nature
existence. The nature of reality that we know of. It also says the weirdest things about it.
Right. So there was string theory in the 90s, and that sort of got debunked. Now it's quantum physics.
Quantum foam.
And quantum. If you go on YouTube, if you read any books by quantum physicists, which weirdly I sometimes do. I don't know why.
Stephen Hawking.
Yeah. They'll tell you that they think that we are in some sort of simulation right now. That all the evidence points to the way that atoms can disappear and reappear, electrons and protons and neutrons, they arrange themselves to create matter in a certain way. Because this wood is the reason why it's wood is because protons and neutrons are shaped in a certain way, and all of that is so that there's one mystery that ties everything together. And you hear a lot of scientists will say, "Give us one miracle, and we'll figure out everything else." Because they to this day, it's like the only way they can piece the puzzle together is by saying that we might be in some sort of simulation. Now they don't go any farther than that. Nobody ever explains what that simulation is, or if there's a creator of this simulation. They don't want to get into that because science is not concerned with things that they can't prove. So if I pick up this pen and I let go of it, it's going to hit the table. That's science. Like you can prove that you can do this trick a million times and it'll always be the same. But if you say that, well, maybe it can float in the air, science says, get away from me. I don't want to hear that. Because all they care about is what they can prove. So they'll say, yeah, it looks like we're in a simulation, but they won't go any past that. They won't even try to even think about what that even means. So it's actually up to us to fill in the blanks.
So Stephen Hawking, God rest his soul. I love that man. I wept when he died. I was inconsolable. My mom, can attest to that. She was home that day, and Stephen Hawking had a chapter about this called in the book A Brief History of Time, and it's I think the chapter is called Time's Arrow, and it was I was just reminded when you were dropping the pen and talking about the law of gravity. Yeah, that's pretty immutable law, until you drop a pen and it floats upwards, of course, like the law stands. It's what we observe.
Right.
And but the thing is, Stephen Hawking brought up the point, there isn't, on the other hand, any reason why we should experience time itself, an illusory concept that we impose on things. Why we should experience time in the manner that we do. So why shouldn't our experience of a moment like dropping this pen, why shouldn't it be that we start from here with the pen going up? Like if you drop a glass and it shatters, why is it that we experience time as dropping the glass and it shatters rather than the glass shattering
backwards?
Yeah, like unshattering itself. What a ghastly and wonderful idea.
Right,
unshattering itself.
So
I gotta write that down. Well, that's like a song title.
You're actually going somewhere with this, because time is, like Einstein would say,
I'm just writing this down. Unshattering. Every now and then I get lucky. Yeah. Sorry.
No, it's cool, dude. This is a laid back podcast. I don't care. And you know what's crazy is, like, Einstein revolutionized science because he figured out that everything is relative to
gravity.
Yeah.
To mass. That I like. As far as mind-blowing concepts go, that's one that kind of everyone
does that mean is
aware of.
Now, I don't know.
Still the craziest one.
I could be going crazy by saying this, but does that mean that if things were sped up, like if, let's say, the sun was a little bit bigger and there's more gravitational pull and the Earth moved faster around the Earth, would that mean time itself would speed up too?
Our understanding of time.
Right.
So for instance, we've observed, this is okay.
This is good.
Now we're down the rabbit hole a little bit.
Yes. This is what I want to
God help you all. Okay. So time is in the way I've heard it described by people like Stephen Hawking, time is not like a measurable force. Time is a byproduct of gravity. So what does that mean? I'm just gonna grab this paper towel over here.
Go ahead.
Now, I'm stealing what I'm about to kind of demonstrate here from a movie called Event Horizon. Anyone who's seen that movie, it's a classic horror movie. I will not summarize it at all, but this is the coolest explanation. All right, so very simple little thing here, but when I saw this, it blew my mind, and that's when I had to like read everything I could find about it. So we can picture this as space, okay? Picture this sheet as space. If you okay, let's take this here. When you set an object on this, you can see that space kind of bulls under a little bit, right? If I set a heavier object, it would, create an even bigger bull, right? The heavier the object, the more the curvature of space.
Right.
So, what that means is that if you were on Jupiter, I'm not going to nail this, but this is the principle. If you were on Jupiter, which is a much heavier planet than Earth, an hour for you might be like a period of months, if not years, for us back on Earth.
Wow.
And even the astronauts, all wear like special kinds of watches that can function in a vacuum.
Yeah.
And this is crazy. Like, even when they've been on the space station and they come back down after like months on the space station, an astronaut's watch, which is synchronized to like the nanosecond to the ones back at NASA. That's why they're special. Their astronaut watches that they're wearing in the space station for 9 months are like 3 minutes faster.
Wow.
When they come back down. Wow, that's
that
weird.
little bit of
just
travel.
from that little bit of travel, that little distance. Like,
so that means that if somebody, if an alien society, whatever you want to call it, was out in the trillions of whatever, I don't know, 1 light year away, let's say, I don't know.
Yeah, which is
crazy
millions
far.
upon millions of miles.
Which is crazy far.
Yeah.
If they can somehow have the technology to view us, would they be viewing us in the past? Would they look at us like, look at those Romans? Like, what would they be looking at?
Well, they would be seeing a past image of us because, for instance,
the light hasn't reached them yet.
All of the starlight that you're seeing right now, depending on which star you're looking at, because some of these are so monstrously huge and so far away, you're seeing light that's probably billions of years old, which you're seeing their prehistory. And the closer to the end of the life of these stars gets, the brighter our night sky will be getting. Wow. So, like once a lot of those stars have become black holes, which is just the most terrifying and wonderful concept but like long after they become black holes, like you're seeing like they're basically a recording of their deaths.
This is what I don't understand about, and I'm not attacking religion at all right here. I actually love religion. I think religion is great. I think religion is a huge part of just humans in general. But I don't understand why religions are so scared of science.
They shouldn't be.
They shouldn't be.
I'm not, like, for instance,
it's the most amazing thing when the more you discover in the realm, especially when you go out in space, you start to see that this is something big happening. Something ridiculous is happening. So we're inside of it. We're part of it.
So I'm 36, and I'm at the point in my life where, like, I can unequivocally declare that I am a follower of Jesus Christ. For myself, I happen to believe that he's the Son of the living God, that he rose from the dead after 3 days. All of it. I believe it. My belief in this wasn't inculcated or beaten into me at all. It came after a long slog through everything I could get my hands on. This was like the one I didn't want to be true, actually, because this is
a lot of people can say that.
Yeah, but what solidified it? What solidified my absolute belief in a God is science. Like science,
I agree.
Like science and what I happen to believe, the elements of my faith are like one informs the other. Like, I mean, even when you like,
it's a good point, dude.
So for instance, like this idea that all Christians believe the Earth is only 6,000 years old, and just like,
that's the one that gets everybody.
First of all, nowhere in it is anything like a specific number stated.
In fact,
whatsoever. Like,
in fact, Peter, in the book of Peter, it says 1,000 years is like. He doesn't say is.
I'm the Lord. A day is 1,000 years.
A lot of Christians read the Bible literally. So they thought. A lot of Christians I know, they think the world is 6,000 years old. But they think that when I bring up that verse to them, they'll say, yeah, 1,000 years. They think that means 1,000 years is equal to.
It's called the day-age theory.
But here's my argument to them is like, our years are based off the sun and the earth. You think a God that created the universe based his days off our sun and our earth? There's no way. So when Peter was writing that a day is like 1,000 years, he was saying that there's no exact equation to translate each other.
He's
just saying that our days are relative to us.
No, he's saying that
he's actually making a scientific statement.
What he's saying is that time for an infinite God is meaningless.
Right.
That's what he's saying.
That's what I'm saying.
Like,
so when you try to say the world is 6,000 years old, and you try to point to that part of the Bible and say, well, look, everything else must be not real.
Well, it's not totally like, so the people, with, well, how do you explain how old starlight is, or how old this carbon dated rock. Well, first of all, carbon dating only really works very well with things that are less than millions of years old. So first of all, that doesn't even really stay. It's really good, for instance, for dating like old documents.
Yeah.
So this is how we catch forgers and things. Like carbon dating
Yeah,
is
it was
wonderful
good for the
that.
Dead Sea Scrolls.
Yeah, exactly. That's really what it's brilliant for. It becomes uncertain, like and then completely and totally unreliable.
Yeah, because a certain
later
amount,
on.
certain amount of radioactive decay, everything it blends in together.
Yeah.
So after thousands of years, really,
But-
it's really just a guessing game.
All I'm saying is that like nowhere in the Bible is this really like
It doesn't say definitively that it's that.
like this doesn't
world
affect. Yeah, this is.
Do you know what that comes from?
This
It
is
comes from-
unimportant. Like it's not an issue.
And here's the thing: I want to add to what you're saying. I agree with you on that.
Sorry.
A lot of these people they take every word literally. So what they do is they take all the genealogy from Christ to Adam and they add it up with their calculators. Nowhere in the Bible does it actually say that this is that's where they come up with this 6,000 year thing. It's actually the Catholic Church that started that. And I personally feel like that was never meant to be done that way.
Well, it wasn't. A lot of but what one thing is a lot of the Bible is meant to be literal.
Right.
And certain parts are very clearly not meant to be literal. Like for instance, a lot of the elements of the books of the major prophets.
Isaiah
and like
Jeremiah,
Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Daniel.
Right.
Those are
four.
the big ones.
Uh-huh.
Ezekiel is just the weirdest book in the
it's
Bible.
almost
It's like a kaleidoscope.
It's almost like you're
wonderful.
reading an alien abduction story.
That's because in chapter 1, it's absolutely describing UFOs.
He's like, oh, this
describing
metallic object
Like-
came from the sky, and then
No, he talks about wheels within wheels
with eyes on
with
them.
eyes around the. He's describing a flying saucer.
Yeah, because back then,
Like
there was no that wasn't even a part of your brain. Like you couldn't even concept. There was no way. Nobody
could conceive of a flying object in the first place. So how are you going to describe a flying saucer, which you can barely conceive of now?
So he's only describing it based off what he knows, and that's how he described it the way he did. But here's my view on everything. I just want to throw this out there before I do, because I feel like this has to be established of what I believe.
Mm-hmm.
I consider myself a Gnostic. Okay, what a Gnostic is the opposite of agnostic. Agnostics are people who don't know and don't even want to.
They have a general vague
They're just like,
belief in
who
a
knows?
power outside ourselves.
Maybe
but they're
something's
uncertain.
real, but I don't know. I can't prove it. A Gnostic is somebody who takes scripture and says that this is part of the collective consciousness of humanity, and these scriptures are put forth by the collective consciousness, and they're really what they are describing is they're describing like a lot of scripture is based off like what's called astrotheology. So you see these recurring numbers 12, 3, 7,
40.
Yeah, you see all these recurring numbers, and it just happens to be the same amount of constellations in the sky, the same amount of planets in the sky. 3 being water, earth, and sky, and you realize that there's different layers to these scriptures, right? That's why I call it the collective consciousness, because the people that wrote these things, they might not even known what they were even writing. It was almost like a dream. Like Carl Jung calls these calls this dream interpretation.
Oh, I know.
And
Carl Jung's my favorite.
He applies it to scripture, where these scriptures are basically like dream interpretations, and they're set forth and they're timeless.
Well, it's
They
much of
evolve
it is
with
in a style, depending on what book you're talking about. But like if you take a book like Ezekiel, who's see like prophetic books follow a very specific literary structure. There's something called an inaugural vision, and that's like the first chapter describing what the prophet saw, like he had like a vision communicated to him or an encounter, of some kind. And they're always really powerful, overwhelming, horrifying things. So, for instance, in the book of Ezekiel, which is just the strangest and most horrifying and most beautiful, it's like reading a kaleidoscope.
Yeah.
I don't care what you believe. I mean, I do care.
Well,
but like,
as a literary,
like regardless of what you believe,
just as a literary piece,
if you're just like the power of reading something like that is undeniable. And so, for instance, in chapter 1, when described, like Ezekiel has a particularly horrifying vision. He sees, the sky burning, essentially, and things coming out of the horizon, and then he describes a type of angel called the cherubim. Now we think of cherubs, of course, because of the 19th century. We think of cherubs as
Babies.
little babies with harps,
wings.
right? No,
That's
like
Catholic
that,
Church.
yeah, this is how cherubs are described. They're giants with 6 wings, 2 of which are designed to hide their 4 faces. 4 face of a man,
Lion,
a lion,
ox.
an ox, and an eagle.
Yes.
Yeah, like they're clear. I mean, like I think of John Carpenter's The Thing, you know, which is one of my favorite movies.
Yep.
In fact, the shirt is, from that movie. But like,
And he describes them as that
something
they don't
grotesque
turn.
and unintelligible.
He describes them as they only go left, right, back and forth.
He's
They don't
describing a type of movement that like defies our own physics,
Yeah.
which is very similar, mind you. When you watch a UFO, it doesn't look like it's even really moving.
turn. Yeah.
And it's like one of the declassified videos. See, because the greatest crime for me today, honestly, and I mean this, like UFOs and the Pentagon's confirmation of things like this, declassified, clearly objects that are not terrestrial. I'm not the one saying that. That's like the CIA. You can read that. They've declassified millions of documents. I get fired up about this because it's like, people literally like lost their lives to try and get this stuff out there. And this is the single most important question that we have, I'd say, besides issues of divinity and God. I'd say it's, are we alone in the freaking universe? And if apparently, unless they're trans-dimensional beings, which is what I happen to believe, if they're able to come visit us like this, or these are their drones or spirit projections, whatever, if they are themselves angels, which I happen to believe, good and bad, fallen and holy, wouldn't you want to, like, clearly their civilization's far more advanced than ours, which means that they have a greater understanding of things than we do. So shouldn't that, I mean, why is this not front page news all the time?
Yeah.
I guess that's the thing I'm trying to get out. Like,
Right.
I don't understand. It's like literally like a farce or something. Okay, we declassified 3 videos of our jets being chased or chasing a spaceship. And you can hear American pilots, the best in the world, the best in history.
Yeah.
The greatest of all time.
Describe these stories.
You can hear them on video,
Yeah.
freaking out. Like, U.S. pilots don't freak out.
No.
Like, you're talking about the stone cold, like the closest thing to Terminators that you can get.
Do you know about Bob Lazar?
Oh,
So
I'm almost insulted that you asked me if I know.
do you want to tell? You want to run down the Bob Lazar story?
You run it down, and then I'll chime in. Because
and
I won't be able to figure out.
I
where
don't mean
to
to
start.
cut you off if you weren't done explaining what you were saying.
No, I was just saying that's the biggest outrage to
Yeah.
me.
You would think people would be more focused on this topic.
Yeah, like the book
I
of
agree.
Ezekiel, for
I
instance,
agree.
he starts describing wheels coming out of the sky, wheels within wheels made of burning bronze, I think it is, with rings of eyes around them. Now, you just draw that. Because when you see a UFO, it kind of spins like this.
Yeah.
There's like an inner UFO that spins,
It's like the gold rings from Sonic, but with 2 of them spinning with eyeballs inside of them.
or just take, like one part, the outer
That's
edge
what
of
he
the UFO.
wrote.
Yeah,
That's what he wrote in the years. Was it 600 BC when Ezekiel wrote his book?
I think
700
it was
BC,
636.
something like that. Yeah. So it's like, so you got this guy in Babylon, because that book was written in Babylon.
Yeah, the Jews were captives at this point.
Yeah. Just before they went back, Ezekiel wrote his book.
All of which was predicted, by the way, in earlier books of the Bible.
Isaiah.
Yeah.
If you read Isaiah, they date back Isaiah to like 700 BC, and he describes Alexander the Great.
Yes, he does. Yeah.
Perfectly.
The eagle from the north.
Yeah, he describes everything Alexander the Great's going to do, and Darius too. Before that, first he talks about Darius, then he talks about Alexander the Great, and it all happens.
Cyrus,
So the
King of
Jews,
Persia.
the Jews really do get validated a lot.
Well, and also this is like, people are like, oh well, they're just arbitrarily picking the Jews as the special one. Really? Well then, okay, explain the fact that, like, you tell me one other nation in the history of anything ever that has ceased to exist to the point where, like, literally there's a term comes into existence, diaspora, dispersing, is then by, I think, every single empire, true empire that has ever existed, targeted by every empire, for extermination to some degree. All of them.
Yeah.
Every single one of them. I think we are the only true empire right now that hasn't targeted the Jews. And here's the thing, describe one more nation that has been obliterated. It's ceased to exist. It's people all over the earth. Every single empire has
from 70 AD to 1946.
Yeah, when Titus
Hebrew became a dead language.
So
now they have their
It's not even that. Here's the thing. Describe one other nation that's been obliterated. In 70 AD.
Titus Caesar.
Titus, sacked the entire sector and destroyed the temple, just like Jesus prophesied in the Sermon on the Mount, by the way. And
exactly 30 years
the jury's
later.
not out, by the way, on whether or not Jesus existed or anything. I mean, it's the lunatic fringe now. Even atheists are embarrassed by those people. He existed. What you believe about him.
There's enough historical outside of the Bible. There's enough historical evidence to show that there was a human being, Jesus of Nazareth.
It's in Roman records that the Nazarenes caused in trouble.
Romans wrote about it. The Babylonian Talmud wrote about Yeshu, the Nazarene, who got hung by a tree because he was doing magic. They wrote about that. So there's enough you can piece together. If you were in the court, if you were trying to prove in court if this person was real, beyond doubt he was real. Now I'll be honest with you, and I don't know how you might not like this, and a lot of people might like this. A lot of Christians might like this. There's outside of the Bible for evidence of people seeing him return from the dead. There's not a single reference until about 65 AD. So there's a 30-year gap between his supposed resurrection. Now, hold on.
True there, though, buddy.
Let me finish this.
All right.
There's a gap. I'm saying for as far as records that are outside of biblical, but
I know.
But however, where was I going with this? So
sorry.
So you can argue. I mean, well, yeah, he was real. He had a lot of big following. He was this religious reformer. He was a Jew that turned a bunch of Jews into a different religion and new sect of Judaism. But he didn't come back from the dead. You can make that argument, and that's the
big
solid.
It all hinges on that. That's the argument.
Thing.
Yeah.
That's the thing. That's what divides up a Christian from just a historian. But the point I was trying to make was there's the fact. Just if you want to say that he didn't exist at all, you really haven't done your homework.
That's what I'm talking about.
That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah. Like what a person believes about him. He's one of three things. He's a liar. He's a lunatic, or he's the Lord. He's what he says he is.
Right.
He's one of those three things. That he existed at all, it's only people not that was a movement. Jesus is made up, and we have more evidence for the life and execution of Christ, even the resurrection, because actually Josephus
Josephus was the first person.
He wrote extensively about all the people that saw him after his resurrection.
He also wrote that in past 70 AD. So that's the third.
But Christ was executed in AD 33, so it wasn't that far away.
AD 33. That's what I'm saying. So that's what I say. I said a 40-year. Did I say 60-year gap?
Yeah.
I meant about a 40-year gap. I'm sorry. Let me correct myself. It's about a 40-year gap. No, I said 65. So yeah, which would be 30 years. You got about a 30-year gap from when he supposedly came back from the dead, and from somebody actually saying he came back from the dead. So that doesn't mean that there's something out there that got destroyed that we lost. They were writing papyrus back then.
That's the thing.
So there could have been documentation and people saying, "Oh, we found him. We saw him. We just saw him walking down the Dead Sea yesterday. He's back from the dead." There could have been that, but all I'm saying is, right now in 2021, nothing exists until about Josephus' time.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't
because I have the book of Josephus. I know exactly what you're referring to. There's a chapter in the Josephus in the Jewish history of the Jews, Antiquities, where he actually writes, around this time there was a man named Jesus. He had a big following. If you want to call him a man, this is what he says. He was a man. If you want to call him a man, he worked many wonders.
Yeah,
many
wonders. That is so
cool.
And
then he writes. He was crucified and he was seen living 3 days later. He wrote that.
He was this is the guy that he was like the first actual wartime journalist. He followed Titus as Titus was
he fought against
slaughtering the Jews.
He fought against the Romans, and when the Romans conquered him, he was one of It's actually kind of fucked up. There's this thing called the Josephus something. It's like this thing where they took all these Jewish prisoners and they didn't have enough resources to carry them all with them back to Rome. They only could take a certain amount. So what they did was they put them all in a circle and made them kill each other, and then whoever lived would get to come back to Rome with them. Josephus was one of the survivors.
Yeah, that's
so Josephus gets taken back as a prisoner of the Romans. They carry back the menorah. They carry back all the gold plates. Everything that existed inside Jerusalem is brought back to Rome. It's this big, glorious triumph from Titus Caesar. And they take all these Jewish slaves and bring them back to Rome. And Josephus is lucky because he gets put into a class of scribes where the Flavian dynasty wants to really they want to make Jewish history a part of Roman history. So they force Josephus to make a Greek book of the history of the Jews, and that's where he wrote in about Jesus of Nazareth. So that right there, that's the thing that a lot of Christians point to and say, look, we got our proof. And it's not bad proof either.
There's more than that, though.
There's more.
Like, a lot more. And we have more documentation for the life, the miracle workings, the execution, and also the resurrection, as well. That's something, like, at least his body was missing.
Yeah.
We have more evidence of that than we do for the existence of William Shakespeare and for the existence of Alexander the Great.
And that's what I'm saying.
To name just two.
No, and that's what I'm saying. Is like,
now, I love Shakespeare.
Shakespeare.
Okay, I'm like a huge Shakespeare guy. Like, I can sit here and recite like Macbeth.
There's only one portrait of Shakespeare that exists. That's a real portrait of Shakespeare. All the other ones are people drawing from their imagination what they think he looked like. He never really went out in public. There's actually no proof that he could have been a fake. What do you call it?
An alias.
He could have been an alias. Name. Some people think that him and Francis Bacon were the same person.
Yeah, it's people think he's either Francis Bacon or Thomas Marlowe, who's another very famous playwright. He wrote in Shakespeare's time, probably the second most.
Right.
Or he had to have been some kind of a noble, because this is the big thing for these psychos that don't believe that he existed, because the argument came and then the argument went with whether or not Shakespeare existed. Why is this important? By the way, A, he's the greatest writer in history, and B, he literally invented about 90% of our
English
language that we're using right now.
Right.
And
he had a big part in the King James Bible too. He was part of the Kingsmen, the scribe class of the
James Bible. It's like
the King's Court.
Reading Shakespeare. It's wonderful.
During the time from 1604, the King James Bible, which is the most sold book of all time, by the way, the English King James Bible came out in 1611. From 1604 to 1611. There was a group of people called the Kingsmen, and they were responsible for making all these amazing plays like Macbeth, Julius Caesar,
like putting them on.
Caesar was. Shakespeare was part of that Kingsmen crew. He was there in that court when all that went down. So you got to realize this is like, he was so ahead of his time that even right now in 2021, people cannot catch up to how good
people
he was.
Don't like the idea that this person who was very clearly like a peasant, very clearly, because this was the Elizabethan times, like literally Elizabeth herself was sitting on the throne.
Yeah,
and people don't like the idea that a person who was not in the royal or
until 1604. Until 1604.
Yeah, they don't like the idea that somebody who was born like a lowly peasant could have that level of understanding about how royalty works.
That's
true.
And
it is odd, but at the same time, it's not really odd, because Shakespeare based almost all of his work on this really old history book about the medieval history of Europe till that time. That's where he took like all the stuff. Why is this super important? Well, because literally, how thousands, if not millions, of courses
and I know a book
are taught about Shakespeare.
You're referring to Beattie's history, Ecclesial History of the English People.
Yeah,
he talks about Julius.
I'm very proud of you.
He talks about. I know a lot of history. He talks about. He starts off the history of England with Julius Caesar.
Yeah.
That to Shakespeare, England wasn't England until the Romans came. And then he said he thinks that the mix of the Germanic Celts and the Romans is what the English people are, which is a good point.
You know what I mean? On a squeak toy. Sorry.
But you know what? I want to talk about this Bob Lazar thing, dude.
Yeah, I want to hear, like, you lead it off.
Okay, Bob Lazar, back in the 80s, I believe, was working for what's the place over in Nevada?
Area 51.
Area 51. He's a scientist. He knows everything about elements. He's an elements guy. So yeah, I guess you can call him a modern day alchemist because that's what really alchemy came from. It's from
I
mixing.
like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Bob Lazar works on crafts, and he's a specialized government worker for Area 51. And one day, a craft gets brought into Area 51, and it's from unknown origin. It looks like a UFO. This is what he says. This is his words, not mine. It looks like a UFO, like you would see in a movie, like a flying saucer. His job was to reverse engineer this craft because the American government had no idea what it was, where it came from, how it even operated. Check this out. This is how mind blowing this is. Bob Lazar says that this craft had no electrical gear at all, not a battery, not a switch.
Yeah. No circuits. Nothing.
All it had to make this thing operate was an element. I can't think of the name. I should look it up. I really should. If you want to look up Bob Lazar element, it should pop right up. There was an element that was unknown to the chart at the time. It was a new element.
Oh, what the hell is it called? Yeah.
Element something. On. Yeah, look it up real quick. I'll keep talking while you're looking it up. So he finds this new, they discover this element that powers the craft. And what it does is this thing can fly, can bend gravity to its will. So if you can bend gravity to your will, you can move in any direction you want, as fast as you want, up to the speed of light.
Yeah, that's
so this craft had the ability to fly at the speed of light without any electronics. So I think the sun is the only thing it needed was to power it. Was like a sun, was some sort of solar power. And I could be wrong about that too. Maybe
they're not even sure that they understand.
They got
the type of energy.
Bob Lazar says they got it to fly, and people died during the experiment because this element was so deadly.
Well, also because
people would go near this element and die. It was like the Ark of the Covenant, like the way they explain the Ark of the Covenant in the Bible.
It could be radiation.
People said they went near the Ark of the
Covenant.
Oh,
you're not allowed to touch the Ark of the Covenant because of the holiness of God.
Well, the funny part about it is that this is why I wanted to jump to Bob Lazar, because Bob Lazar says that this element that they found, if you touched it or dealt with it, you were dead within a couple days. That's what Bob Lazar was saying on Joe Rogan. People were dying, and it was getting swept under the rug. It was never even...
Did I miss this part of it? I must have missed this part of it. Well, how the hell did I miss that?
There's an element.
Okay.
That's what I'm trying to find the name of the element.
Okay.
Bob Lazar element. And people were dying that were touching and dealing with this element, or getting cancer or dying young. People like 20 years later would be dead from cancer who worked with him.
I don't know why people find it, at all unbelievable. That stories like this aren't the absolute truth. I mean, for heaven's sake, Area 51 is the most like when you think of classified, you think of two things normally: Fort Knox and Area 51.
People, that's what I'm saying. People, would you find the element, by the way?
I got the Bob Lazar thing.
So people right away when
recently, evidence suggests a UFO whistleblower Bob Lazar was telling the truth all along.
That's what I'm saying. Okay, so I want to talk about that real quick. Immediately when he went on Joe Rogan, immediately the Twitter mob was like, he's a liar.
Yeah, it's because it's scary.
It's fake. There's no way this is real. Joe Rogan's just trying to get views. All that came out there. But then all these independent fact checkers and all these... There's people who actually, for a living, they watch people's body language and see if they're lying. There's like 10 of them on YouTube that all of them said that Bob Lazar was telling the truth.
Well, what about what's his name? Travis. Oh my gosh, I can't. I'm like ashamed. The movie Fire in the Sky was about this guy, the Travis Walton.
Okay.
Who was disappeared with a crew. He was with a crew of loggers. In 1976, this was like world famous. I'm sure most of you have heard of this. It's a world famous story. They made a movie about it.
Yeah.
1976. This logging crew is coming back from their site and remarks that they see what they think is a fire in the forest, and so they go to investigate it. And Travis Walton, who's early 20s, I think, at the time, goes right up to it, and they see that it's a freaking flying saucer, and they watch as they're begging Travis to come back, but of course he's mesmerized. I can't even imagine. Wow, what a thought.
Crazy.
And he gets knocked backwards like 20 feet in the area when this thing shines a beam on him, and then he disappears, and the UFO disappears. And so they go back traumatized. They race into town and report what happened. Nobody believes them, of course, but Travis is gone. He has just disappeared. Huge investigation. By now, the world news has figured this out, and now they're converging on this little town. Anyway, Travis returns 5 days later, traumatized and naked and dehydrated and with like um, like too heavy of a beard, and
Like he was gone for a while.
yeah, like he didn't know where, like 100 something miles away, and
What?
and they administer lie detector tests to all like what I think there's 6 or 7, like woodsmen, like loggers, all of whom passed. One was inconclusive, but that's because he was being combative and he didn't like the police at all.
Wow.
And all of them, Travis himself passed multiple ones. There was one that I think recently on this game show that he failed, but then the game show was taken off the air when it was shown that you have an 80% chance of failing that when you're telling the truth. That particular one.
Wow.
The point is this: that's it takes more faith to believe that 7 grown men have trained themselves randomly to fabricate a story about abductions.
Wow.
And causing attention on their town and their life and their families, and then has somehow trained themselves to beat a polygraph test, all 7 of these guys, about this abduction. It takes more faith to believe that nonsense than it does to believe, this is a universe that is unfathomably huge.
Yeah.
And every time we learn an answer to a long-standing question, the only thing that we've done is open about 8 billion other doors.
Yeah.
To more questions.
Right.
It'll never stop.
It'll never stop.
The more we understand about the universe, the less we understand about the universe.
Yeah.
Like, so, I mean, that's not an opinion. This is true. Anybody will tell you that.
Yeah.
The point, like, it doesn't. I don't know why it's so difficult. Well, actually, I do. I think it's difficult because this is a horrifying thing to think about.
Right.
Horrifying. I mean, like, the idea that these are benevolent, really great creatures or anything like that. Think about what's described in every abduction story. You are paralyzed and taken against your will in the dead of night. Whether, how can beings that have cracked the interdimensional travel code, that secret, how is it that they still need to cut human beings apart, to figure out how they work?
Something strange about that.
Or maybe it's like sadism and these things are like fallen spirits.
Do you know what another theory is?
Yeah.
DMT. So there's the idea that these abduction stories are really what's happening.
The government and or that's possible.
Maybe that, but also, so we now know that DMT exists in all life.
Pineal gland, right?
Yeah, it's produced by the pineal gland, causes you to dream. That's what dream comes from DMT releasing in your head. That's what dreams are. So people have theorized that these abduction stories are some sort of like extra amount of DMT being pumped into someone's head while they're sleeping, where they had these insane dreams where they actually think that they're being abducted by some sort of being because they're on this extremely intense DMT trip, and they wake up and they think that really happened. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but it does bring me to the next topic, is that when the thing about DMT is this. It sort of forces you to recognize that everything that you're experiencing is in your head, and it's all kind of mental in a way, because your brain is what's producing your consciousness.
It's through a perceptive lens.
So that's the thing, if all life has DMT somehow, so even plants, even blade of grass has DMT in it. Is DMT everything? Is DMT all consciousness? And is consuming extra DMT give you like is reality a pond, a pond that hasn't never been touched? It's like completely flat with no ripples. And by taking DMT, is what you're doing is you're tapping your finger onto the pond and making everything shake.
It's any other ripples.
And you're seeing reality bend a little bit because you're imbalancing your DMT amount. So now everything's off. That's a theory that's been thrown around, and it kind of makes a little bit of sense, dude. Because, okay, even if you do believe in God, you think everything is just creation by God, right? And
I find it unfathomable that there's not a God.
Yeah, and like Islam will say maktub, which means destiny, which means that God creates all of linear time. It means everything's planned. There's only very little bit of free will, but you choose the will or you can reject the will. You have free will within a certain plane. So
yeah,
there's
within
that,
parameters. I like that.
yeah. So that's Islamic. That's
rules.
also Christian.
You're
It's
not free will in
also
a chess game, but you got to abide by the rules.
yeah. So that's
Or
so,
you're not playing chess anymore if you don't.
so there's that theory, and that's like DMT is like this like sort of like it just by doing it or even experiencing it or studying it, you see that all of this consciousness has some sort of source backed up somewhere.
Oh,
and then
the
that,
simulation you're talking
and that
about.
brings us back to the simulation theory.
Okay.
Is DMT some sort of psychoactive?
So here's what I think about this. Like for a while, it wasn't until I don't know, maybe about 2 months ago that I bothered with this issue at all, because at first I thought it was I was like, this of all the psycho things, like now to avoid there being a god, like
Right.
I mistook what the at least what I consider to be the more rational side of the belief was really saying. And essentially, as I understand it, Elon Musk described it pretty well.
Yeah,
as he always does.
Yeah. Okay.
And but essentially, it's something akin to the Matrix. Whether or not it's a malevolent reason, like the Matrix, like we're being used as batteries. Who knows about any of that? Who knows if it's a simulation? But basically, that we're plugged into some kind of like collective, massive multiplayer online RPG. Well, here's the thing: as fascinating as that is, like I myself involuntarily as a Christian, it's like, oh, that can't be true. And then I thought, well, why not? How would this affect my understanding? Like if that were true, that would here's what that would mean for me: that that the Lord is the programmer. That would not affect my belief whatsoever. The only thing for me, and I've just, the past couple of months, I've really kind of been getting in touch with this. I've had a little bit of a battle since I had COVID and everything. It was like the first thing I would say really, for whatever reason, shook my faith, to the point where I was starting to be preoccupied with uncomfortable questions for me.
Yeah.
But then it was all reaffirmed, in a variety of ways, concrete ways. And for me, even if this is, a simulation, there are always arguments for and against. That wouldn't affect my beliefs whatsoever. It wouldn't contradict a thing. The age of the Earth, either way, like whether it's billions of years old,
right,
or 6,000. You know what? Like that has no bearing whatsoever on my. In fact, the order of things described in the creation record, conform exactly to the fossil record. Exactly. That is the exact.
Well, you know what else is interesting is that the spoken word. The spoken word. Okay, we talk about the word as being like this, like aspect of God itself.
It is God.
The vibration, the frequency that makes all
life
life exist. That His word put breath in your lungs, right?
Yes.
So now, if you take that and run with it, this is what you get. The written language, the alphabet. The beginning of the alphabet coincides with that 6,000 year date, which is kind of mind blowing because it's like in the beginning was the word. Boom, it's dated right there.
Well, at the beginning of civilization, as we know it, was probably around that time.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. Right around 4,000 BC, the Sumerians really, all of a sudden, there's an explosion of intellect. Where humans, let's go with the scientific approach that the world's billions of years old, right? So for billions of years, it's all just like kind of just everything's just like a program, or all animals are just instinct, even apes, right? But all of a sudden, 4,000 BC, right around the time where the Bible says the world started, right?
Well,
all of a sudden,
people say that it
that's what
says
I know.
that.
So let me get this. Right around 4,000 BC, there's all of a sudden this explosion of civilization, of written records and alphabets, and there's government. All of a sudden, there's all these metal making technologies, all came at the same exact time. Like blew up. I don't know. And historians, archaeologists, anthropologists, they all say the same thing. It's like there's like this explosion happened where
there's no lead up,
where humans went from hunter gatherers living in huts and under trees
to metropolitan beings
in caves. Yeah, to all of a sudden having pyramids being built, towers being built, all of a sudden out of nowhere.
Yeah, so roughly 7,000 years.
So that's what
ago we were there to iPhones.
So that's
and space travel.
And that brings me to my next thing is like
Ugh,
people take scripture, not just the Bible, even the Vedas or the Upanishads or whatever scripture you want to take that you think is the word of God, right? How much of this allegorical aspect of it? 'Cause people want to take these things so literal, but it almost helps your case to prove your religion more. To think maybe it's more allegorical than we think. Because and here's my point about that is like I want to give out my personal view on what's going to happen to all of us when we die. This is what I think. I think that these books like Revelation and the Vedic describing the end times. I think it's all. I think that what's happening is the collective consciousness is bringing forth an allegory of space time. So that really what they're talking about is they're talking about the universe, not talking about humans.
Big crunch.
Exactly. What they're talking about is here's what I think's going to happen. Now I'm about to get trippy right now. This is what I think happens. I think after we die, you're gone. You are no longer. You are asleep with no dreams. You are done. You are not in existence any longer. You rest until the moment. What do they call it? Singularity. When all.
There are a couple singularities. Yeah, the technological singularity.
Right. So eventually the universe is going to eat itself up.
Yeah.
So a black hole is going to
has a singularity.
There's going to be one black hole. Eventually, one black hole will be the universe. But after that event, on the outside of that, in the other side of that black hole, is when consciousness will become matter. So everything you're experiencing right now, the way your life, the way you grow as a person. The person you are, the older you get, the wiser you get, you grow. You're like this being that is going to be reviewed, maybe judged, maybe brought back forth, and that's when I think that all life is going to wake up at the same exact time. It's not like people are waiting for us in heaven. I don't think that. I think that it's going to be a moment where everything's just brought back to life. And that moment is indescribable. It's not going to be like this matter that we're living in. It's just going to be completely spiritual.
I get scared about.
It's really, really crazy concept to think about.
Like,
because you want to know why I think
I get scared about hearing about death experiences and stuff like that. I find that very frightening. And
do you want to know why I think that though? Because time being relative, means that time is infinite. So right now, the moment that we're living in right now, you and I sitting here, is infinitely happening forever. It can't be taken away. It happened.
I see.
It exists in our consciousness.
There is no actual past. It's just for some reason we can't access this frame of the video.
And my point is, the point I'm trying to make is, the simulation, the creator of the simulation, is able to take consciousness that existed at some point and bring it back.
Reintegrate it into
his will. And that's what I think that these allegories of the judgment day and the end and
to a degree that's described in the Bible.
And that's what I'm saying. The being risen up. They talk about Revelation talks about
the sea shall give up her dead.
Revelation talks about a moment in time where everybody's brought back up at once. Revelation never says that people are in heaven waiting for you. Revelation actually says that there's going to be a time where everybody's going to be brought back from the dead at the same exact time.
It's Revelation also. Some of these things, I'm glad that you're talking about this, because some of the things, I feel very. This is a fairly new thing that I've been contemplating.
Gnostics, we what we do is we take scripture and we fill in the blanks with science, and we're not scared of science. We embrace science. But we take a scripture, and if something in scripture doesn't make sense scientifically, then it's an allegory. Then that means the collective consciousness brought that forth for some reason. So it's there for a reason.
The collective consciousness.
The collective consciousness.
What do you mean by the collective consciousness?
It means that we're all kind of connected. So collective consciousness. Let me explain. A good movie comes out, and it's the biggest hit of the year, and everyone loves this movie. Well, whoever wrote that movie, they struck a chord with the collective consciousness.
Oh, the zeitgeist.
Yeah.
Okay. The feeling of the times.
The Bible or the Vedas, whatever scripture, Eastern and Western, you're looking at, some is like the biggest. There's the highest up of that ideas brought forth by the collective consciousness. That's why the Bible existed so long. That's why it's still being read today, because something about it these prophets like Isaiah, they figured out, they meditated deeply, and they didn't just scribble down words. They really
encountered God.
They dug deep into themselves and brought forth out of the universe the collective consciousness that struck a chord with every human that read it.
It's because every human being who's ever lived is dramatically affected when they encounter something that is the absolute truth.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to back down about that, because that was a very hard fought thing and still is for me.
And even
I rigorously examine every single one of these beliefs. I can't help myself. I wish that I could, but like literally my own beliefs are under a self-initiated constant attack. Like I'm always attacking my own to fortify it. Not because I'm so wonderful and wise, but because I have a lot of anxiety.
Well,
and I get a lot of anxiety about this.
That's what Nietzsche would tell.
What the Bible also said. It said, "Be a Berean." The Bereans were like the original skeptical inquirers.
Yeah,
like they were the original Penn and Teller.
Well,
and
Nietzsche and Jung both would say that if you have a belief or an idea, that what you should do is you should throw as many darts at that belief as possible and see where it stands.
I seek out the best argument. I mean, like
you shouldn't just.
I can quote you parts of the God delusion, and it's everything that is ridiculous. But why do I read that? Because Richard Dawkins is a brilliant mind, and also how dare I have the arrogance to assail the belief system of atheists. And I don't believe this nonsense about how the rules are okay for me to flip for a while because they've been oppressing me, so I'm allowed to get back at them. No, like I can't attack something that I don't know about, that I'm not informed about. So it's important to read the best from the best minds,
right?
Because otherwise, what the hell is the point of believing or doing any of this? Nothing.
Well, that's what I'm saying. People just seek validation for their beliefs. Nobody actually tries to find truth. Like
truth is horrifying.
Most people, especially religious people. I'm not talking about anyone in particular. They don't care about anything that challenges their belief. They just want validation. They only want to hear about Josephus wrote about Jesus, so that must be true. But Pliny the Elder didn't write about him, so Pliny the Elder must have been satanic. He must have hated the Christians.
That shit goes on both sides.
And that's what I'm getting at. That's what I'm getting at. Is like people shouldn't be scared to
just have a dialogue. Yeah,
challenge your belief a little bit. I'm not telling you to drop your values and beliefs, but like
strengthen your values and beliefs if they're worth strengthening at all. And how do we figure that out? We test them.
Yeah, exactly. We throw as many darts at it as possible and see where it stands after it's all said and done. See which parts of it sticks to, like, which logic, the logos. Okay, so there's another thing about being a Gnostic. Gnosticism is actually the earliest form of Christianity. Some would argue that the Gnostics were the ones that broke off from Judaism. The Hellenic Greeks.
There are like there's Gnosticism. I think like sort of. I mean, there are even quantum Gnosticists. That's like a thing.
Well, here's the thing.
It's like mystical too. Like there's a lot of, and I'm not mocking it. I think because you know what, there's a lot of Christianity that.
Well, it goes back to the time of Christ.
The problem, exactly, and the problem that I have with so-called Christian culture, which as far as I'm concerned is a ghetto these days. Like the problem I have with it is. I am worshiping a God that exists outside of every parameter that we experience and even have any imagining of, because he created them. And so who created God is a dumb philosophical argument. It's provably dumb. It makes no sense. Nobody created God. Why is that? Because God is the point at which the laws of physics and time and gravity as we understand them break down. Yeah, because he created them.
It's the source of all life, source of everything.
If you're going to be an atheist, like, that is an asinine, stupid argument.
Yeah, I believe that too.
And furthermore, if you're going to attack Christianity, this I have to say, because I've heard a few times now, and I did want to address it. I've heard the old attack. It's an important one too. Like this, the history of how the Bible, came to be in the form of, what as we read it right now. Like, how did that happen? Translation and things like that. And of course, I always hear it from the lazy atheists. I'm not saying all atheists are lazy at all, but like this is a lazy argument, and they've got some considerably good ones that are important.
Yeah.
Anyways, the argument, of course, is that, it was all a big Catholic conspiracy, and they'll start throwing around, well, at the Council of Nicaea with this, at the Council of Nicaea, what? Like, We know exactly how the Bible is translated because it's one of the miracles of history. And what do I mean by that? It's literally, as far as mankind's intellect goes, what they did to ensure its fidelity to its original sources was not. It was almost miraculous. For instance, you could be the copyists for every single book of the Bible. If they made so much as 3 mistakes, forgot to dot the equivalent of an I, for instance, or forgot to cross the equivalent of a T, they would not only be taken off the project and that manuscript would be thrown away, they had to burn the manuscript.
Yeah, the Masoretic text is perfectly exact to the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Yeah, which is miraculous.
It is.
Okay, because everything that we understand about, us communicating things downwards, to us now, is like a game of telephone.
Can I just jump in for a second? So, to piggyback on what you just said, people always ask, "How do you know the scriptures that you read today are exactly the same as
Good
what?"
Question. It is.
And so
easy answer.
That question got answered in the early 1900s when they discovered the Dead Sea Scrolls. They find these carbon 14 dated to the 1st century BC, not AD.
Original copies of our Bible.
1st century BC, Isaiah scrolls, Ezekiel scrolls, every single book was exactly the same, word for word, as what you're seeing in the Hebrew Bible.
It's thousands of years old.
Yeah.
Okay,
so it hasn't been changed at all, and that's crazy.
You can't get around that.
Yeah.
All right. So if you still want to,
but check this out. Like now, as a Gnostic, the Gnostic Gospels got taken. You mentioned the Council of Nicaea, and
yes,
it's a big deal because they did.
It's a huge
They decided
deal.
what books were canon and what books weren't. Well, all these Gnostic Gospels got tossed in the garbage because a lot of them didn't really promote like an idea of a church or be depending on a church to be. For example, the Gospel of Thomas. The Gospel of Thomas is Thomas, who's Didymus, which means twin, wrote down the sayings of Jesus, what he heard him say with his own ears, and he wrote them down. It's not like a book where it's a story. It's just saying.
It's like a collection of proverbs.
So if you actually, exactly. It's just like Proverbs. If you actually read it, you'll be like, a lot of this stuff sounds like Vedic. It sounds like Eastern, where he talks about the kingdom of God being within you, and it's sure enough, when you dig into the history, Thomas was assigned when the 12 apostles were assigned to leave and go across the planet. Thomas was specifically assigned to go to India.
Yeah, it was beautiful. I love it.
So it's almost like he knew he wanted to strike the collective conscience of the Indian people was Thomas.
Yeah,
because Thomas had all these Vedic
shot through a beautiful Indian lens.
So he sent him out there to it. The Gospel of Matthew was supposed to be to the Jews. It has all these Jewish aspects. It talks about the Messiah. It talks
the
about
beauty of it all. Yeah. That it's influenced by what colors their life.
That's why I believe the Gnostics are onto something, because the Gnostics understand that there's different perspectives in the world, and there's the collective conscious is deeper than just what the Council of Nicaea wants to put it. That's why I kind of reject the idea of the Scripture being pure and perfect, and you can't challenge it, or it's all literal. That's why I personally challenge that idea. I look at it more of allegorical.
Yeah, for instance, like I've recently reconsidered this, but it wouldn't bother me if, for instance, the creation account in Genesis was like a heavily allegorized thing. For instance, does it necessarily have to be a real tree and an actual apple?
No.
It doesn't. Like, my understanding of this is just as well, you're talking about something that was the author deliberately kept in kind of like an allegorical haze. Maybe it was things he couldn't describe because, he's talking about like a primeval version of reality that we have no understanding of.
And you know what? This back in the day, like if you go back to like ancient Babylon, before the Jews were even people, if Genesis really was spoken by word of mouth up until the time of Moses, the serpent was regarded as allegory of the lower self, the fleshly
also
self.
The wisest.
So the fact that the serpent was that, I mean,
and most
so
beautiful.
If you read Genesis 1-5, as it literally happened, and somebody was there writing down notes. Like, if you really think that it's true, what you're left with is the Earth is flat, because it says that there's 4 corners of the Earth. It says I know. I'm not saying that it is. I'm saying that if you refuse to actually say that there's layers to this thing, It will say that there's a light for the day and a light for the night. We know that's not true. We know that the moon reflects off the sun. That's where the light comes from. So it's like you can't.
Well,
be
that's
too,
insane.
All I'm saying
that's like insane literal.
I'm not saying it's not real. I'm not saying it. I'm not trying to debunk the Bible. All I'm saying is if you refuse, if you can only look at it literally, and that's the way you're going to try to preach to people, people are not going to hear it because you have to. I think the best way to go about it is you have to take it as much allegory as it is literal.
Yeah,
I think they're literally half and half.
Now, of course, the Bible is a collection of 66 books written by everybody from the richest kings in existence to the poorest slaves who ever lived.
Yeah.
Over a period of thousands of years, from people from every country inhabited at that time, every walk, and the unity of it all.
But that's why I'm saying the collective.
It's not a conspiracy. We know exactly how the Bible was translated.
But that's why
a new argument.
But that's why I'm saying the collective consciousness. This wasn't written by one person.
Yes,
this is the minds of hundreds of people.
That's interesting what you just said, actually.
Yeah.
You know what?
I don't know. Think about that. But
no, hang on. Say that again. You put it in such a way.
The collective. Okay, so the Bible being the biggest example of the collective consciousness of humanity is that the fact that, first of all, it was orally passed down from the Babylonians to the Egyptians into the Jewish nation. Right away, you're thinking this is bigger than one person or one group of people.
It's worldwide.
And then you think of all these scribes of Ezra, Nehemiah, all these Jewish scribes that put together this Bible. They stitched together the Elohists, the Jawists, the priestly class. All these different parts of the Bible get pushed together into one thing. That is the definition of a collective consciousness. And that's what it is. It's a book by mankind about the history of mankind, about where we're going, about who we are.
Like a Wikipedia almost.
Yeah, and that's why I think
that's cool.
That's
okay.
why
I like that.
That's why I try, and I don't try.
I understand. I misunderstood you.
I don't try to debunk it. I try to make it more make sense more.
See, I do try to debunk it. And this is what I believe, and this is like I think why I live with I'm being really serious right now. Like I live with a huge amount of like anxiety.
Yeah.
It's almost like I don't know how to live like, without having like, some looming sort of
welcome to being an addict.
Yeah. Exactly. And amen. And I think maybe a big part of that is because I literally assault my own belief system. Like assault it.
Same way, dude.
Like I don't wear gloves with it. Like I take a butcher knife. I don't fight fair with myself.
No, me neither.
And
that's why I'll say this right now.
But it's battle tested.
I'll say this right now. I used to help out a church with what I'm doing right now. That's where I learned a lot of this stuff actually. And I couldn't hang with them because I am the type of person where I'm challenging everything you say to me. I'm going to go home, I'm going to look into it, I'm going to see if it's true. And turns out a lot of this stuff is like, okay, you're kind of pushing on this one a little bit.
It's not true by the understandings that we find ourselves believing and have no idea why we're like. Yeah. I remember asking myself recently, I was like, where did this come from? This abhorrence that something like evolution couldn't have at least taken place in this, localized system. Where did my horror of that actually come from? Like, I don't remember reading that anywhere. I don't actually like. What my parents believe about this, they never abused it into me, right. And I was like, I don't know where the hell it came. I just kind of always thought it. I was like, it's nowhere in the Bible.
Well, Jordan Peterson talks about how it's the Bible, the scriptures, the Bible being the West, Vedas being the East. Over time, when these things are taught in schools, in churches, for thousands of years, from generation to generation to generation to generation, eventually they become part of the human psyche. So people in the West are born with Christian morals the day they're born, immediately.
Yeah, it's because our entire culture, whether you like it or not, is founded on like a Christianized version, for better and worse.
Do you want to know what I told my friend who's a Christian this a couple weeks ago, and he did not like this at all, but I'll say it again. Christianity is responsible for the liberal mindset.
Yes, it is.
So, because I'll give you an example.
It is.
Judaism was very right wing. You follow the Mosaic law. There's 213 laws. You follow them. You don't. If you get one of them wrong, you sinned, and now you have to repent. All this stuff, right?
Offer a burnt sacrifice.
Here comes this Messiah. He says, You guys are never going to follow
He
that law.
raises the bar so high that
Yeah.
nobody can see.
And
Back
he
then, you
reforms.
could not murder somebody.
So
you could not like cheat
and they
with
hate
somebody.
they hate
Like,
saying that. They hate the thing. They claim
Jesus made the
being
bar
a
so
liberal.
high you couldn't ever do it.
They'll be like, you can't say Jesus was a liberal. How could you say that? Well, in a way, he really was.
Jesus was revolutionary.
Revolutionary.
Jesus did not care what you thought about anything.
The fact that he would go up to an adulteress who was about to be stoned.
Yeah. When women were treated like cattle back then, by the way. Okay, Jesus. The people who want to knock.
It's probably the most liberal thing of all time.
Yeah, and what does he do? He, without a word. And by the way, the first account of Jesus' ministry happens to be him being already acknowledged as master. Yeah. Okay, like he was already Jesus Christ Superstar. For instance, which is basically the gospel according to Judas, which is why I love it.
See, you're a little bit of a Gnostic yourself. I can see that.
I just don't limit the God who is limitless.
Right.
For heaven's and so the greater my understanding,
my whole entire worldview.
Like
you just explained.
This is the God of black holes that are the 66 billion times the size of our sun.
Yeah. So
like, why? That's a concept that is so far beyond unfathomable that there's not even a word for it. And that's one out of trillions of galaxies, which are comprised of trillions of solar systems. Wow. Like just to give, I love that scene at the end of Men in Black, the very end. Like when it shows our planet and it zooms out, shows our universe, then it shows how it's like the inside of a marble. Yeah. That another kind of unfathomable alien race is.
It just shows you how
that gave me an idea of like. What kind of a God would it be worth worshiping, by the way, if we had any understanding of all these things? Why then would he be beyond us? Like, now people will say that that's an intellectual cop-out. Bullshit. That's intellectually humble. Yeah. It's intellectually humble when you say, you know what, I don't understand this, and the reason that I don't understand this, with all the creativity and ingenuity imbued into humankind, it's probably not just because we're still in some kind of a intellectual stone age. I don't think so. It's really because God is just that enormous, and we are not entitled to anything. We take whether or not a person believes in something, the truth by its own nature is absolute. Yeah. Relative truth is an erroneous logical thing. Like there's the truth, and then there's your understanding and reaction to the truth. Right. That is relative. It doesn't affect the structural integrity of the truth, and the truth is always therefore terrifying because it's so impersonal and indifferent. It doesn't care about you. It doesn't. What? It's just except for it does care about you when you happen to believe and have faith in Jesus. Who Jesus was not hazy about what he believed. By the way, people have this idea of the European Jesus, which is nonsense and blasphemous. Jesus was a burly, big guy. He was a carpenter. He was a highly skilled, craftsman. Because that was a master apprentice endeavor back then. He wasn't especially good looking, which is part of a prophecy, by the way, you can read in Jeremiah. But the thing about Jesus that really, he wasn't a hippie, and he was very black and white. So, for instance, oh yeah, everything's totally cool, society. Jesus wasn't like that. Right. Jesus directly said, you better be ready to give up everything and grit your teeth if you're going to follow me. He also was very clear about, his mission and what in himself. He wasn't like he wasn't undecided on this. So when he says, I am the way, the truth, and the life, no one comes to the Father except through me, that's not an allegory. That's pretty clearly meant to be taken exactly what it is. People have a hard time with that because that's a very stark thing. Yeah. And this idea that Christianity should be reconciled to or conform with the world is antithetical. Jesus said, "The world, when the world hates you, remember it hated me first." And it did. Yeah. And why did it? Not because it's a big. They can't all be true, and I know that's disturbing. And I wish to God that I could say universalism was true. It would be so much easier to say that. But I arrived at the belief that I'm still attacking the structural integrity to make sure it holds up if I'm going to give my life to it. It's pretty important. Why am I saying all this? Because all you have to do is just open the Bible and, you'll be captivated. I mean, it's it survived all this time for a reason.
It's another level of literary.
Yeah. And also, it's like, I'm glad we are talking about the allegorical nature of, big aspects of the Bible. It's pretty clear contextually, like which book or which section or paragraph is meant to be taken as an allegory and which is meant to be taken, quite literally. And I used to be a cherry picker, it's just like, just because, I have a hard time, like, I don't know why it is the way it is. Like, I don't understand, the big questions like, well, if God's all powerful, then why does he allow this to happen? I don't know.
Right.
And the oldest book in the Bible, the book of Job, is literally one genius meditation on the nature of why do bad things happen to good people.
That's why the most philosophical book ever made.
Every argument that people come up with, about this was given in the book of Job already. I love the part where he looks at God and he's like, you know what? He's like, everywhere I am at all times, when I sleep, when I wake up, in my most private moments, you're always watching. And he gives you the level of horror, because we've all kind of thought about how almost creepy and voyeuristic the concept that is. And what does Job say? The man who is described as a righteous servant of God, he looks at God in frustration. By now, his life has been obliterated as part of the test.
Everything,
his family, his riches. Like, in one moment, he's afflicted with boils. His friends, who are supposed to be comforting him, and instead are saying, "What did you do wrong, Job?
Right.
What is it? Confess up."
Yep.
And Job's like, "I didn't do anything." And it's true. It was because Satan challenged God. He said, God, of course, knew the outcome, but he had something to demonstrate, apparently, to the other angels. They had to report to him.
Right.
And it says, and behold, Satan showed up, and this is so interesting. This is
he says to Job within the dialogue, it's bigger than you, Job. This is bigger than you.
He says, where were you when I made the world?
Right.
But the thing is, like, God directly, he talks to Lucifer conversationally. He says, from where have you come? And Satan answered,
roaming the world,
roaming the earth and walking about it to and fro. And then God says to him, have you considered my servant Job? Have you seen him? Blameless and upright in his ways, a man who fears God and shuns evil. And Lucifer, who is doing his job at this point, which, like, Satan is also means accuser. Like, he's like a prosecutor. Yeah. He's up there prosecuting a case. And so he this is what he says. He says,
he's the DA.
Yeah, but he says this. He says, well, does Job fear God for nothing? Why would he fear you? Isn't it true that you've blessed him in all his ways? Like, he just said, why don't you strike out your hand and take everything that he has away from him, and then let's see what happens, because he'll curse you to your face. And so God says, behold, everything he has is in your hands, only don't harm him. So you know what that shows? The first chapter in the oldest book of the Bible, chapter 1 of the Bible, essentially. It's not in chronological order, but the first chapter of our Bible directly addresses that, our enemy, our adversary, that God is in control of everything. He's not up there rubbing his hands and going, oh, I hope it works out. You got to pray. Come on. Like,
that's the maktub.
Prayer is for us. It's not for, to help him.
That goes back to the Islamic concept of maktub, is destiny is pre-written. It's all written.
Yeah, that's a very uncomfortable concept, isn't it? And
people
that's
can't wrap their head around that.
Well, people can. That's the problem. Is that, like, that? It's like, well, okay, then God, or how's it my fault?
So then Christianity has an answer to that question, though.
It does.
That Judaism never really. I guess they probably have, but Christianity really answers that question with one line by Jesus, and says, "Those who have wept will be comforted." And then you think about that. Blessed are the meek, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. And he's saying that if you're in this world and you're struggling and you think that God doesn't love you because you're not rich and no one loves you,
God,
don't worry.
You have a special place in God's heart.
Like, you have you are the most important one, actually.
You want to know why God destroyed Nate? See, here's the thing. Like, the Bible in the Old Testament is chock full of the horror of the wrath of God. But why does the mercy of God, which is what the New Testament's about, the Christ coming to literally die to, for all sins of mankind, past, present, and future, if we only accept that gift. That's the mercy, of God. For God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, the death of the soul even, but they'll have everlasting life. For God did not come to condemn the world, but to save the world. Yeah. How you do it? By giving his only begotten Son, Jesus. that is meaningless utterly if you don't have an understanding of the wrath.
Yeah.
So, and the Bible, this, I get so irritated with so-called Christianity nowadays, because Christianity has two elements: going into the world to spread the good news, just sharing, that Christ died for you, and that you can't be good enough. That's the point. Otherwise, you could die on the cross. Like,
Right.
it's we don't have to understand it, but we have to open the present for it to be a gift, right? It's that, and helping the poor. It's not the people who preach politics in the Bible are directly contravening Christ's own mandate.
Yes.
Render to Caesar what's due Caesar,
Thank
and
you.
render to God. He wasn't a social justice warrior, for heaven's sake. He was
Thank
like
you.
he not that so he did a lot for social justice, but he wasn't any political
He
thing.
doesn't care about lowering your taxes either.
Yeah,
He doesn't care about
his
none of
kingdom
that.
is spiritual, and so literally Christianity is two things: going into the world to spread the good news, not subjugating it or at sword
And then
point, and helping the poor.
And James talks about what you just said, where a lot of these Christians today, especially in America, the ones who are like the Christian conservatives, who have mostly wealthy suburban Christians, they'll say it's not about works; it's all about faith. And it's like,
What does that
okay,
even mean?
it's like, okay, you're right in a sense where that's where you got to start. You got to start with faith, and then the grace will come after that. But then James talks about being more mature about it and saying, what is faith without works?
Yeah.
Faith without works is dead, he said. So that means he says what is good religion? Feeding the poor. He talks about doing good things.
Yeah.
He says, if you don't have good works, if you're not out there giving all you can,
then it was probably
to help
fake
people,
and
then
inauthentic.
your religion is nothing.
Yeah, you're living as a slave and not claiming.
And by the way, that faith that you say that it's all about faith, and you have all this money, you got a business that you own, and you have a nice house in Amherst, and it's just about faith, not about works. I can save my money then. Well, he's saying that your faith is only shown by your works.
Mm-hmm.
So if your works, if you don't have, you're not bringing forth fruits, like that's why he says we watch out for the hypocrites. You'll know them by their fruits.
Yeah.
Well, that James touches up on that and says, if your works aren't shown, then you don't have faith. That your faith is all a lie. You're just saying you have faith. You might even believe your own lie.
Yeah, that's way more damaging.
And the same people that want to preach the parable of raising of not saving earthly riches but saving spiritual riches for heaven, the same people that always preach about that are the same people that have like retirement. They're all about their retirement funds and making sure they have money saved up for their kids and their grandkids. There's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with doing all that stuff. But it's like, don't be a hypocrite. Do some works. Especially if you have the resources to do good works and you choose not to because it's all about faith and not works, then you're a hypocrite. That's what that means.
Exactly. It's just like, you know why people are like starving for something to get intense about. I think that's why social media, for instance, is the universal force that it is now. Is because it's like this much cheaper and easier, instantly gratifying way to always be able to like step into the role of pretending that you truly are burning for some cause.
It's also
you're not burning.
It's also a true manifestation of the collective consciousness. Look at social media. Everything's
except Twitter.
Yes, Twitter's just a cesspool for politics. But no, I know there's a lot of ugliness out there, but that's what humankind is, ugly. There's a lot of ugliness in humankind. Facebook, Twitter, as much as you want to talk about how it's killing us all, we're all like this on our phones all day. That's all true, but was social media not inevitable? It's like social media not the
Ted Kaczynski predicted social media. In fact, he was the first one, I think, to use the term on industrial society and its future. His manifesto that he wrote, which is like now taught in universities and everything. And I encourage everybody to read it just because it's an important document historically.
Yeah.
But he predicted this.
Yeah.
But granted, like, not only was he a murderer, but he did happen to have, he was 160 something IQ. He was the youngest full professor in the history of, I think it was MIT.
Yeah.
I'm not positive about that. At like 23, he was also an experimental subject in MK Ultra.
Yeah.
Literally. Did you see that movie on Netflix? Like that, it's in multiple parts. Sam Worthington is the detective who tracks him down.
I gotta check that out.
It shows him being tested, like, over the period of a year.
Oh, really?
Like,
I haven't seen that yet. I gotta check that out.
It's so creepy.
It is
to think of things like that, but like, I guess I'm talking like myself about like my own beliefs about this and everything, because for anybody that is ever having any kind of crisis of faith, um, Mother Teresa herself, and I'm not even just talking to Christians now, just anybody. This is a human thing I'm addressing for a moment purely. Mother Teresa herself is now a saint in the Catholic Church. Mother Teresa, if you read her diaries, and I encourage everybody who struggles with any kind of faith, to read them. Mother Teresa, who is like the definition of charity as we understand it, who saw the worst types of horrors, and what humans inflict on one another, and just like was in the middle, in the center of the fire, like helping directly, struggled so badly with the concept of the existence of God. But I love the message that she said. She just basically said, like, I kind of know that I won't feel that I even believe at all. I'll feel the opposite, but like that's the best time to march. That's when your faith is really demonstrated. Like, why? Because I choose to continue believing this even when I don't feel it. Like, I have to believe that, because why are we supposed to pray to a God, for instance, that knows everything, because he describes us as being able to change his mind. What he's really doing in the Bible is condescending to cosmic infants.
Yeah.
To us, like he's talking not down to us, but in a way that we can understand on our plane of existence.
That's where the parables come in.
He's not bound by the rules that we experience because he made them.
Well, think about it. So the Messiah comes.
I just get so frustrated.
The Messiah comes, and what does he do? He speaks in parables. Why? Because he's talking about.
Can't understand
he's talking about something that's so great that we would never understand what he's actually talking about.
I'm very proud, to be sitting next to a guy that like knows that statement, and most Christians, don't even know that. Most Christians can't even recite the Ten Commandments.
This is why I bring up the whole Gnosticism versus literal Bible believing Christians, is that these so people take these parables as if it was spoken in one time for one reason, but these parables have principles behind them. Principles of honesty, principles of perseverance, principles of whatever spiritual principle you can think of is behind these parables, and you're supposed to apply them in every aspect of life. So that means that it's not just limited to the Bible; it's limited to everything. A lot of philosophy behind the New Testament, even the Old Testament, you'll see in regular philosophy like Plato and Pythagoras and the Vedas, the Eastern Confucius, all these, and Christians will immediately repel you from mentioning that.
It's so tragic.
Like you bring up like all these similarities between Buddha and Jesus, and Christians will say, "Don't ever say that. There's nothing compared to those two." Well, it's like, okay, what do you think Son of Man actually means? Son of Man means he is the result of all good that human brought forth. So that means there's aspects of Buddha, aspects of Confucius, aspects of Plato, aspects of Aristotle. All of it goes down to the Son of Man. That's why history started.
He's the embodiment of it.
He's the embodiment of
fulfillment of it.
That means that
strengthens my faith as a Christian.
It does.
By the way, C.S. Lewis.
That's why I try to bring that forth, because I think Christianity is dying for a reason.
It's dying
because people. There's this like.
It is
really gray, vague.
Christianity is dying because it's not Christianity anymore as defined at all by the Bible. And if you believe, what the Bible says, even especially, by the way, when it's contrary to what our society or culture, I'm being generous now because it's a cesspool. It's worse than Rome. But
people try to apply Christianity to their political views now. You see that more than anything else. Trump is chosen by God. This is what these evangelical churches say. Trump is chosen by God, and he's gonna save America.
God chooses every ruler that's in power.
Where in the Bible does it ever talk about saving America?
Yeah, America's not even talked about in the Bible,
right?
At all. Which is alarming, by the way.
Which is alarming.
Why are they not in, like we talk about ourselves like we're in the end times right now. Yeah, except for America's not ever even remotely described.
We're New Babylon.
Maybe we're the whore of Babylon. Maybe we are the whore of Babylon. And I love this country.
I think
I'm talking about the like American culture.
Yeah.
Trademark. Like or lack of it.
I believe that, dude.
Like it's a violent, 'Cause, yeah, our new, like, we don't need well, they had the Coliseum. So do we. It's called Twitter. It's called Facebook.
Yeah.
Like, we're throwing people to the lines. We're doing worse.
Yeah.
At least you
Cancel
fucking
culture.
died, you know, when you were eaten alive.
Yeah.
Okay? You know, it's a different kind of death. It's a fate worse than death when you're fated to surviving a life that's been stolen and obliterated from you because of a mindless Twitter mob. A different kind of so-called collective consciousness.
Oh yeah, that's what I want. This is the last thing I want to say because we're so, dude. It's like an hour and 40 minutes already.
Fair enough.
So that's
was
what,
a big question.
This is why I bring it. I mentioned the logos, and then we got caught off track. The logos in the original New Testament, the Greek New Testament, the Gospel of John, he says, in the beginning was the Word, and that book that got translated in English as the word. But really, there's two words in Greek that mean word. There's lexi and there's logos. Lexi is the common word for word. If I said the word in Greek, it's lexi. But he used the word logos. Logos is a different meaning for the word. It means logic, reason, understanding,
like consciousness.
It means everything.
The living thing.
Yeah. So to apply the logos to everything would mean whatever the truth is. So he was the truth. So I feel
Hence the way, the truth, and the life.
That's why I feel like a lot of these modern Christians that are like, don't worry about the original text, just read the King James version in English, and they miss.
Isn't Lucifer a genius to infiltrate it? You know,
that's what I'm saying.
Infiltrate the one thing that's supposed to be the house of God, and yeah. I don't care if people think, well, how could you believe in this?
Let me finish this real quick though. The thing I'm trying to say is it becomes a game of telephone almost, where we lose the real. If you really are a Christian and you really want to give yourself up to Christ, wouldn't you want to know what the original gospel said? What it means? Wouldn't you want to know if there's a difference between the word logos and lexi, what they mean? And then when I found that out, it changed everything I thought about Christianity, because now the logos becomes this figure that can crop up in everything. Every problem I have, I think about the logos. What's the truth right here? Not what I want it to be. But what is
the essence of the concept?
What am I really? What's the answer? Based off truth, logic, reason. That's what that is. It becomes very, very philosophical, and you lose a lot of meaning when you drop that logos out of the picture, because Christ is the logos.
I like that. Yeah, you lose a lot of meaning.
Yeah,
that's the thing. It's just like, you know, it's every surface has like a depth, you know. And it's so limitless, you know. I mean, you can literally like go down an infinite rabbit hole about like a single verse.
Yeah,
in the Bible.
What?
I mean, like,
every word is put there for
some of them are so weird and otherworldly and clearly inspired by a power that we don't understand. For instance, you know, when Jesus is casting out Legion, I'll leave off with this just to, you know, because anybody who rediscovers this, like, it just invigorates your life. I don't care how old you are.
Yeah.
Like, Christ, you know, is casting out the demon Legion. And the demon, you know, isn't like, you know, coming out at him. It's cowering and gibbering. And it says, Master, have you come to torture us before our appointed time? And Jesus doesn't, you know, have a banter. He doesn't ask. He commands. What is thy name? And this is one of the coolest and creepiest things in the Bible. And the Spirit answered, I am Legion, for we are many. Yeah. Oh, of course, like, a legion is a Roman army.
Yes.
It's 1,000 soldiers.
1,000, yep.
And so that, I just, like, it's littered all over the Bible. And for myself, I just bring it up because I found my faith tested in all kinds of ways that I was kind of like terrified of all my life. And I'm sure that's going on for everybody in their own way that's watching this. And, like, there are answers, and you can find them, and they're not all.
And don't be afraid to challenge the status quo either.
I mean, honestly, like, you know, the thing that informs my entire life or whatever, I personally attack the hardest. Why do I do that? Because I live with a lot of anxiety, and it's difficult to keep any of that in check if you're constantly questioning whether, you know, your own reality is itself real, and it's not just some weird marijuana concept. It's like, you know, your understanding of, like, mathematics or you know, bears it out, like, why that could be a real thing. You walk around exhausted. And so I find it for myself necessary and exciting in a scary way, to constantly go all out in attack. Like I Google questions constantly that I know are like, I kind of don't want to know the evidence against these things. Like,
Yeah.
like people that try to debunk
something
the
that a church
prophecies
member
being fulfilled. Like,
something that a church member would call blasphemous. Don't even do it. You're following Satan.
But it's at the same time, at that point, I know I'm living something that I'm allowing to be an illusion.
Yeah.
And it's just like, so I guess, my own, like, it might seem like, it was all over the place, but I mean, so is the concept. It's all over the place because it's everything. Yeah.
The universe is static, and it's not.
If we were able to like streamline the nature of this talk, I would think we'd be doing it an injustice, because it's supposed to split off into infinity, right?
Yeah.
That's the whole nature of the concept.
Yeah.
But I like how the one guy signs off on here, like when he just tells everybody that he loves them or whatever. Like every podcast.
Robbie?
Yeah, he's always like, I love you.
Robbie, I gotta get him back on.
I really
here.
love that. So
yeah,
shout out to him, and like, yeah, I love you too. Like, I want you all to be doing as well as you can, and for what this is worth to any of you, I will be praying for you.
Yeah, and I'll just finish off by saying, don't take me too serious. I just say what I believe, and sometimes a year from now I might say something different.
Why shouldn't you be taken seriously?
My mind changes. That's all I gotta say. And I think it's good and healthy to
be a thinker.
Yeah, it's good and healthy to be able to change your mindset once in a while and look at things differently.
Yeah, how horrifying would it be to ever arrive at one fixed thing forever,
and then have to stay with that forever?
It's like intellectual death.
It doesn't make sense. It's like trying to say a planet's gonna stop in the middle of its orbit and just stay there. It's not gonna happen. We are a part of the universe. The universe is a part of us, and we're a representation of each other. And dude, I can talk for hours about this stuff, man. I'm gonna have you back on as soon as possible.
You got it, man.
Thanks, man. All right, guys. See you later.